and they're just like sweating. It's like, I got paid today, and I owe for rent, and I'm trying to get my guitar out of the pawn shop, and it's like they're almost crying, and it's like I had rent due and I had bills due, and I said I wasn't going to come down here, and I came down here, and I lost my whole paycheck. I lost everything. It's like, oh God, I am so glad that I don't like to gamble, because that just, it's like on top of having addiction, which is just rough, your addiction is you give all your money away, which causes you to just, like in Phil's case, live in this crazy doubled life. Always just lies, lies, lies. Lies, broke, you're having to explain why there's no money. And so I couldn't find anything about this, because as people that know how this thing ends, it's just after it was, you know, there was like, well, I guess it's not being investigated anymore.
Disturbance on the moon.
But so he takes out a ton of loans
This plague must not be allowed
for med school and to live off of, college kid style. And think about that as a gambler. You just get this fat chunk of money into your account at the beginning of the semester, and for a gambler, wonder if he spent it all. You know, his girlfriend was like, yeah, we used Phil's money to pay all the bills and everything, and but it's like, what if Phil just spent his entire loan or something? That could have, you know, and he's probably sitting there just wanting to gamble so bad, and he's broke, and he's got this gun, and he's like, hey, if I go just rob an escort, that could be $800 to just have fun with. And so I think the gambling addiction was a lot, you know, they ask him, like, so you like to gamble? And he's like, well, I go to Foxwoods once in a while, but I don't know if I can do a lot. Gamble a little bit, but I don't know if a lot. And then it gets to a point where, and this is, if I was a detective, I would use this strategy a lot. I think this strategy just makes a lot of sense. And it's like, how do we eliminate you as a suspect? Because part of our, he goes into a monologue, he's like, part of our job is proving who didn't do it. So you understand what I'm telling you? Phil, work with us here. And it's pretty, normally it's pretty easy if you didn't do it, because there's something that will eliminate you. And Phil doesn't have anything. He just doesn't remember. I don't know, I don't remember. He does a pretty good job of, I was noticing, his I don't remember technique is, he'll say, you know, something very vague, like, I don't know. I don't think I remember. And then he'll say something like, I think my dad may have stayed at that hotel, like, at some point I might have been in there, but like the Cheesecake Factory, I do shop. Like, he'll say something like that, and then when the detective goes, oh, like, when was that? Was it this last week? He'll just be like, no, I don't know, I don't remember, and then turn on the annoyed, like, I don't know, I don't remember. And then 27 minutes in, so about halfway, the detective said, do you have anything to do with Craigslist? And I think at that point, Phil has to know that he's not in a good position with this whole thing, because they got all the security cameras, and then now the detective is just asking him, just probably hearing a detective say, yes, I'm sure just made Philip's insides just, Craigslist, Phil. And then he kind of does, you know, but it doesn't really go anywhere. He's just like, I use Craigslist to try to find an apartment. Sorry, Phil doesn't have an accent. And then he kind of tries like a Tammy, maybe, like maybe Shanann did it, just to try to get some sort of confession going. And So he goes into a strategy, which I also think is solid. He's like, goes into a strategy. He's like, maybe you were there, Phil, and maybe, you know, something happened. And, basically saying like, maybe you were there, and there was something happened, and maybe she was just mad at you, like, and he's lying. There's two sides to every story. It's like there's two sides to every story, so we gotta hear yours, because if it's just this girl's side, then it's not looking good. So it's like, was it her fault? You know, did something happen with her? Trying to be like, just trying to get him to put himself in that hotel at that time, and Phil is just going, no. He's getting really annoyed. And so he's like, you know, were you there? Something happened? And Phil says, no. You know, are you sure? No. And Phil goes, I answered that 4 times. And then the cop's like, okay, I can see you getting a little bit annoyed, okay, with me. But I'm just trying to... We're just trying to take a shot at this whole thing. And, I love how they say the word shot, short. So you don't recall. And I think Phil just knows he's screwed, so he's just starting to clam up. Yeah, part of me as this goes on, so say now we're maybe like 30, 35 minutes into a 48 minute, and I sort of started getting annoyed with the detectives, because I like their... Seems like a funny guy. He seems to, I don't know, be a good interrogator, except it sort of stalls out. And I was thinking last night, it's like, did you even want a confession, or did you just want to talk about how he doesn't remember? Because you gotta turn up the heat. Like, I understand slow playing it. I love the slow play. You know, 15, 20 minutes in, let him ramble, and then you gotta bring the hammer down at some point. And it just never comes. He never brings up the IP address. He never does anything as far as, like, not lie about the evidence, but like I said, I would have said, Phil, hi Phil. There's a stack this high of pictures of you. Clear, lie a little bit, say clear pictures of you, security camera pictures. You know how many cameras you walked in front of, Phil? Why were you at the hotel? But instead, he goes on these long, like, monologues where Phil's just sitting there listening. And it's like, you know, that you can't make this, you know, we're not going to be able to make this right, but, you know, we can at least be honest. Your side of the story, to be honest. And kind of does the cookie jar technique, like, hey, when you were kids, you know, you got caught, you got it, blah, blah, blah. And Phil isn't saying anything. There's these huge paragraphs being said by the detective, and Phil just sitting there, and then the detective will get done with this long paragraph, and then Phil will just sit there, and then the detective will be like, are you nodding yes? And Phil is just, at this point, like, I don't know. I can't help you. What you're saying doesn't apply to me, and you're just saying these long paragraphs, and I don't even know what I'm agreeing to. And he's kind of right. It makes it easy. If the detective is just going on these long, like, if you were a kid in the cookie jar, you know, it really makes it easy to be like, I don't know. I mean, what you said, I heard it, but it doesn't really apply to me. You know, I think questions are better. Like, even just, are you telling the truth? I remember Graham asked Chris that the first night. He just looked at him and said, are you telling the truth? It's like that. What a great question to ask in an interrogation, instead of like, the cookie jar. Take a shot at it. And then, oh yeah, they talk about email addresses, but again, he never is like, is the sex addict 135 your email address. He just goes, do you have email addresses? And Phil goes, yeah. He goes, what are they? And then he reads them to him, and then the detective moves on. It's like, that's a great line of questioning. Just stick with that. But Phil's clamming up. Clamming. No, the cop's like, this is what. Oh yeah, so Phil's getting annoyed. And then I kind of liked what the detective said. He's like, well, I'm sorry that you're annoyed, but this is what happens when you dance around the truth.
I've never seen anything like it.
You know, just be honest.
This must be what Eris was after. Something's wrong. I feel
We can't change it, but we can make it right.
Some
And then
things
Phil hasn't
in
really
my
talked. He's just sitting there. And then
thing.
Phil asks for a lawyer again. He's like, can I just have a lawyer? I don't know. You're saying these giant paragraphs. I don't even know what I'm agreeing to. I want a lawyer. And right at that moment, the other detective comes in and sits down. And he's like, hey, Phil. All right, Phil, you don't want to talk to him. You know, you're annoyed with the questions. Let me answer different questions. But Phil's like, no, I want a lawyer. And it's like, it's too late. You needed to change. I think 15 minutes, 20 minutes before, that detective should have taken a break and the new detective and switched it up. Because Phil kind of had the detective on his speed a little bit. He's just like, I don't know, I don't remember. I could have been in the last game, but I just don't remember. You know? And if that other detective would have, so the other detective tries to come in and save it, like, Phil, I know you're saying you want a lawyer, but I mean, what you're saying is you don't want to talk to us, but we could keep talking. And Phil's just like, can you just give me a lawyer? I want a lawyer. And the second detective that comes in, really trying to hang on, like claw on, like, let's just keep talking for a little bit. And he's like, no, I just want a lawyer. And the first detective's like, all right, we're going to end it. And it ends there. And this video's getting long. That's where I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to talk about Megan's interrogation on the next one. Thank you to everybody that has subscribed and liked and commented. It helps me. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Palooza. How you doing?
We can't move. We have to go.
If you would like to support this channel,
Guardian.
there's a working Patreon link in the description. I would really appreciate it. All right. So today, we are going to go over the Craigslist killer's girlfriend's, Megan, his girlfriend Megan's interrogation, which happened at the exact same time as his down the hall. And you got to feel bad for Megan, because here she is, traveling back from Boston to Jersey, trying to get her whole back problem figured out. She's engaged to a doctor.
What is that?
She's going to be a doctor herself is the goal.
You've heard the stories
And she
of the
thinks she's got her
traveler's
life.
sacrifice,
You know, she thinks she has her
of
ducks in a row.
darkness descending upon humanity.
But little does she know,
Before us
old
lies a
Philly
dark
boy,
remnant of their
her boyfriend, is this violent, night-crawling psycho. Okay, so she goes from New Jersey, where she's been hanging for a month. These guys can't handle having their girl out of town. These women go away for a month, and just all hell breaks loose. So she's been in New Jersey for a month. She gets back. She's happy to see Phil. Hi, Phil. They hang out for a night, and then the next day they're going to go to Foxwoods Casino, do a little gambling, eat a little buffet, be in love, the whole nine. And then on the way to Foxwoods, police light them up like a Christmas tree. I'm sure it was a bunch of undercover police cars, and I'm sure it looked real weird. And so, in there, brought into the homicide. At one point in Phil's interview, the detective's like, do you see the door? You see the sign on the door that says homicide? So they get pulled in and interrogated. And obviously Phil probably has a decent idea what it could be, and she has no idea. She's been in Jersey for a month, and now she's sitting talking to two homicide detectives. And you can get a lot of information and the timeline from her, because Phil can't remember if he was at a hotel 10 minutes ago. But she, because she doesn't think she has anything to hide, for both of them, just remembers everything. Just talkity talk. So they start with the money situation, go over their bills and everything, and it comes out that she hasn't worked, or she doesn't work. It's 2009, so that was a pretty hard year to get a job. And so she doesn't work at all. He goes to med school, so she says he takes out the maximum amount of loans, and they just pay for everything with loans. And she's like, well, it's fine, you know, because eventually we'll have money, because we're going to be doctors.
It appears to be a ritual of some kind.
And
That's where we start.
I wish that they would come out with how much money was left in those loans, or because I picture that Phil gets that big old chunk of money at the beginning of the semester dropped into the account from the loan company, and he's he's an addicted gambler, so he probably spent it all. It would be interesting to know if he got that fat loan and gambled it away at Foxwood. So they're talking about his gambling, and she's like, oh yeah, he never loses. She's like, yeah, we'll go down, and if he starts to win, then he'll play, but if he starts to lose, we just quit. He'll just quit, you know, just like every other gambler. He'll quit. He doesn't lose. He doesn't leave with less money than he came in with. And that's why those casinos are so huge, because no one loses money to them. And it's interesting to listen to her throughout this thing, because we've listened to a lot of people that are sitting there lying for dear life. Just, I don't remember. It was a million years ago. I do have a friend named Shmita. I just want them to be safe. I just want everyone to be safe. But her, I think for the first time on this channel, she's just an open book. She's like, yeah, I remember that. Interestingly enough, I remember. And so they're kind of trying to figure out their relationship, and she's like, we're together 24 hours a day. We don't really have any friends, and we always just sit in the apartment together. And then she goes home from Jersey for a month. They ask her about Craigslist, and she's like, I've looked for a few jobs on there, but I've never posted anything. And they're like, does Phil use Craigslist? And she's like, no. Phil never uses Craigslist. I've never seen him on Craigslist. And she sounds so Jersey the whole time. She's just like, and like, we're broke, obviously, so I can't even really do it.
It's unclear, but they don't seem affected by the nightmares at all. Not like we are.
They ask her, like, how has Phil seemed? And she's like, just normal, he's stressed about money. I don't even know. Alright, so then they get to the computer, which someone in the comments for one of the previous Phil videos had said that they tracked the IP address just to the building, and I don't think that's true. They tracked the IP address, the emails that went to the escorts that got murdered. They tracked that to Phil and Megan's Comcast account, to their apartment, not to the building, and then they sat out until Big Phil walked out. They had tracked it to the apartment. So, they're asking about Craigslist, and she just still has no idea. So she's rambling on about how she's like looked for jobs on Craigslist and nothing came about, and then they like looked for the apartment on Craigslist. But they're asking her, you know, does anyone else live there? Because they're thinking, is this like could this be like a roommate? Because that's what could throw a whole huge kink in this, is if it turns out there's like a roommate that lives there, or a friend that's always there that was like, hey, let me use your computer, and booked it. So there's a lot of questions of like, no one else lives there, you know, no friends come over or anything, and she's like, no. They're both like, no, we don't really have any friends, which I think is probably because of Phil. He seems just kind of like an arrogant douchebag. Then I don't know, they're talking about their landline phone, and she's saying we get all these telemarketer calls, just like all of us. And as they're talking about the IP address, and they're starting to divulge more information, poor Megan's life is just crumbling. You know, very few people in 1 hour go from, hey, I'm marrying a doctor, yes, to, should I be scared to go home with this guy? That's a crazy hour to go through. And then eventually they get to the pictures. Time to check your pictures, people. And so they get down to the pictures of, you know, they talk about the IP address, you know. She's asking what this is about, and they bring up the robberies and the homicide, and they bring up the IP address come from your apartment, you know, the IP address. These messages were sent from your apartment, and she's like, well, could someone hack into it? She's very cooperative, but also just clinging on to her poor old life, which is understandable. And so they're going over, you know, the IP address from your apartment. Can you take a look at this picture? And they show the first picture to her, and she blurts out, where is this? Which is even better than a yes. As far as, you know, does this look like Phil? Because she sees it and immediately recognizes Phil, and in, you know, wearing shoes that he doesn't wear, and wearing a hat pulled down and looking all like murdery. And she goes, where is this? And she's like, that looks like Phil. Then they start doing cop stuff, like, okay, she said that this one looked like Phil, date and time, and they're like, what do you think about this one? And she's like, that could be Phil. And then they're like, what do you think about this one? She's like, that might be Phil too. And then she's starting to realize that how serious what's going on, and that Phil could be. And she kind of, at that point, stops IDing him so easily. They're like, whoa, what about this one? And she's like, no, that's not Phil. And I don't know if she just goes into denial, or as if she's in her head trying to kind of cover for Phil or lie for Phil now that she's like, oh God. And so she's like, no, that's heavier than Phil. As it goes, she's like, no, that's not Phil. That's heavier than Phil. That's not the right hair for Phil. He doesn't have shoes like that. I control all of his shoes. I don't let him wear shoes like that. And they're just, what about this one? Came from the apartment. And once she realizes that they're just a stack of pictures of Phil, she doesn't want to say that that's Phil anymore. So she's basically, her life is changing right in front of her eyes. And at one point they ask her, okay, if we brought you a clearer picture, would that help? And she just goes, no. No, it wouldn't. And if he's down, he stops. So I don't know. The overall, the whole interrogation paints Phil as a incredibly broke college kid that has a gambling problem. And as we've talked about throughout this whole thing, I really think this whole thing started with a quick and easy way to get some gambling money. Because think of the feeling is if you take out this giant student loan that's used to pay tuition and your life and the girlfriend's life, and you're going into massive debt, and then you take a chunk of it and lose it gambling. And then you take another chunk of it and lose it gambling. And then you're like, oh God, is there going to be enough for food and rent? And also, too, I get a weird feeling that Phil had robbed other people or done, he had that gun for a year before this whole thing. So who knows if he had robbed other escorts or if it worked. And then I think once he was in the room pointing the gun at him, he's in all the chat rooms as Sex Addict 83 or whatever, and into tranny porn or something about, like he was like in a looking for transvestite people, or I don't know, I can't remember. They were talking about it, but he's into all this kind of like sex stuff, Sex Addict, and so I think while he's sitting there with the gun, he was like, well, I'm here, I might as well get some underwear too, if I'm here. And so I think it started out, let's get some money. Go gambling. I'll get $800. Go sit at the tables, and then it transitioned to this weird kind of like I'll get underwear while I'm here and dominate these women, because it kind of feels like Megan dominates him. She's like, we spend every second together. He loves it. He loves that we just spend every second together. He loves that I tell him what shoes to wear. It's just the best. And someone had said in the comments that maybe he was abused as a kid. I can kind of see that too, with the hatred for women now and I think that Jalissa, the one that he killed, they said that she had probably fought back. And to shoot 3 times inside of a hotel room, I mean, that is a loud, crazy thing to do. And then to just walk out like, hey, everything's good. I'm just walking around the Prudential Center because I like to shop for coffee. Hey. To fire off 3 shots, that shows just a lot of anger. I picture him just like, ah! And as they're showing Megan these pictures, you can tell she's just like, oh, man. And it gets to the point where she's like, should I be scared to go home with this guy? And this has been her boyfriend for years. They lived together. And they're just like, I don't know. I came from your apartment. And so they're like, we need to decide, and I think that they arrest Phil. I couldn't figure it out, but I think they arrest him directly after his interrogation. And also, I figured with both these interrogations, they should have stopped halfway through each one and then gone and talked to each other, because the people from Megan's could have said, yeah, he's just broke and gambles, and she's been gone for a month. That's perfect for his little nutso crime spree. She's been gone for a month. But they don't. As soon as they want to like tag team out in Phil's interrogation, he's done and wants a lawyer. And then in Megan's, they showed him a picture and she's like, where is that? Why is Phil at a hotel? He was supposed to be at home texting me. And so Megan's ends, and I think they arrest him. And and they search his apartment, and she is still on his side, and then they search his apartment, and they find the gun, and they find the underwear, and they find, I think, other stuff too in the apartment. And then Megan, the press catches Megan going in and visiting Phil after they find all that stuff, and then as she's walking out, she's crying, you know, and people think that was her being like, "It's over, old Phil. You're done, bud." They found underwear and a gun in our apartment, so. And Phil he's in jail, being held without bond, and then Phil's brother goes and sees him, and Phil tells him that, just forget about me, they're gonna find a bunch of other stuff too. Which could mean just more underwear and sex addict stuff, or could be that he had done this to other people. And then so they start the trial, or they start the initial pre-trial stuff. And one day they walk back to check on old Phil in his cell, and he is dead. And he's a doctor, so he had a bunch of like veins and arteries in his wrist and in his ankle, his neck, and he had sliced everything, and he had done it right. And he had also had a bag over his head, and so he committed suicide in his jail cell. That's kind of how this one ends, people. And I don't know. I don't like to see that. I think a lot of people are like, "Good, he took himself out," but I think, he's 23 years old. He owed 60, 70 years in prison, or, and he just got to take the easy way out. But Megan, if you're wondering, ended up going to medical school down in the Caribbean, and hopefully she has a good life going. And I'm trying to think anything else. Yeah, I think I'll cut it off there. That's the end of the old Craigslist killer. Thanks to everybody that has liked and subscribed and commented. You are the best. There we go. There's another one in the books. Try to figure out who to do next. But, yeah, I hope you guys all have a great day. True Crime Loser out. Why, starving why? All right, good morning, Shmita fam, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. How's it going? I hope you're going well. All right, if you would like to support this channel, I got a Patreon link in the description. I would really appreciate it. So today, we're starting the next multi-day case, and we're going with the Craigslist killer. And for this one, I want you to start by picturing a 25-year-old girl in New Jersey, and she's been in New Jersey for a couple weeks, staying with her parents. And she normally lives in Boston with her boyfriend, who's in his second year of med school. And the reason she's in Jersey is because she had back surgery the year before, and she's just had a lot of trouble with it, and a lot of pain, and so she goes from Boston, where she lives with her boyfriend, once a month, maybe even more than once a month, back to Jersey. She stays with her parents, and she gets her back work done by the doctor. And then she'll go back and live in Boston in the apartment that her and her boyfriend have rented. And like I said, her boyfriend's in his second year of medical school at Boston University. Megan, is also planning to go to medical school, but right now she can't work as we're talking about this. This is in 2009. So in 2009, at the time, she couldn't work or she couldn't start school because of the back injury. And so she's kind of in this health problem limbo. She's traveling home to Jersey, staying with your parents, you know. It kind of feels like your life's on hold when you are back at your parents, especially with health problems. And so she's been there for a couple weeks, staying at her parents, trying to get her back figured out. You know, I mentioned her name's Megan, and so Megan, she's just ready to go back to Boston and be with her boyfriend, be in her own apartment, not be in her parents' house, get over this back stuff. And so she's excited to head back to Boston. As she's leaving the house, her mom warns her. She says, "Hey, Megan, be careful." You know how moms have that just intuition? And she says, "Megan," you know, the mom's talking to her 25-year-old daughter. She says, "Megan, be careful. Someone was killed in Boston, and there's someone attacking women in Boston." And Megan says, "Okay, thanks, Mom. For sure, I'll look out for it." And she heads back to Boston. And what her mom was referring to was the week previous, an escort who had been traveling around had landed on Boston as her next city to try to make a little money. And this escort posted a ad on Craigslist saying, you know, you want to hang out with a hot blonde, call this number. Right after midnight, she gets a call, and it's a guy saying, you know, how much? The old how much phone call. She tells him it's 200, and he said, "Okay, I'll come to your hotel room." And he gets to her hotel room, and too bad it wasn't Mike DiPolito. She probably would have left with a house, but it happened to be a big old white boy with a baby face named Philip Markoff. And Phil, when the escort saw Phil at first, she felt instantly safe. He's a big, clean-cut, preppy-looking white boy, baby face. And so she, in an interview, had said that she had felt safe instantly when she saw him. And so they go in her hotel room, and she closes the door, and immediately when she closes the door, she turns around, and there's a gun in her face. And it's Philip is standing there, and he's calm, and she says that it looks like he's done it before. And he says, you know, if you do everything I say, no harm is going to come to you. And he ties her up with white plastic zip ties, rummages around the room looking for the money that she has. And the escort also sees that he takes a couple pieces of underwear from her. Underwear? Somewhere Russ, just far in the Canadian jail system, just perked up. Underwear? What? So he takes a couple pairs of her underwear and leaves. And, you know, she wriggles out of the zip ties and calls the police, and then goes down to the police station the next day and, you know, says, oh yeah, also too is takes the underwear, and then he's wearing black leather gloves, but he takes his gloves off for whatever reason, maybe so his fingers work better. There's a roll of black tape, so he tapes her mouth shut, but he touches the tape with his bare hands. And then also, if you remember, he called her phone to set up a meeting, so he sits there on her phone for a little bit while she's tied up, trying to delete his number off her phone, which he does. But also, he's just touching it all over with his little grubby fingers. So she goes down to the cops the next day. You know, armed robbery. They do an investigation, and, you know, and time moves on. And then 2 nights later, they get a phone call from a hotel, a different hotel in Boston, that there has been a murder. And same thing, and this poor woman, it was named Joe Lissa, and same thing, just a troubled life. Actually, her friends say she was getting it turned back on the right direction, but had just kind of lived a troubled life, ended up escorting, probably never ideal. And same thing, had made a date, had made an appointment with someone, invited him to their hotel room. But this one was, her face was smashed in with the butt of a gun, and she was shot 3 times. This is 2 nights after the previous one, where the blonde escort didn't die. And so the blonde escort, a couple nights later, she's probably just getting over this horrific armed robbery that she went through. But a couple nights later, the cops call her and they say, hey, we may have a picture of the guy that assaulted you. Would you mind, taking a look at it? And so she was like, yeah, definitely. And so they show her a picture of this big old preppy looking white boy with a baby face walking through a lobby of a hotel. And she goes, oh crap, that's him. That's the guy that attacked me. And how did you get such a clear picture of him in the lobby? Like, you didn't have this. They had pictures of, real blurry pictures of him walking through the lobby of the night that it happened to her, and they were like, well, actually, this is a different night. This was last night, and he actually murdered an escort last night. And so you can imagine that the escort that wasn't killed, this had just happened to, but she had gotten away, had this feeling of like, oh my God. I could have been just as easily. And so now there's a murder, and they know it's connected. So now they know there's this big, preppy-looking white boy wandering around Boston, assaulting escorts, murdering escorts in hotels. And a couple nights later, 60 miles away in like a suburb or something, it happens again. But this time, same thing. Craigslist, makes an appointment, comes to her hotel room, but in this case, the woman had her husband, who was kind of her husband and business partner and pimp. The pimp husband dude was sitting in the lobby of the hotel waiting for a text that everything was okay. So same thing, Philip goes in the room. So this is a night or two after it had gone wrong in the hotel and he had killed her. So just think, he had killed someone in a hotel room, and just 2 nights later he's already doing it again. So it wasn't like he was so freaked out or so sad that it happened 2 nights ago that he was like, I'm done with this crazy stupid plan to rob people in hotel rooms. So he's doing it again, which to me is just nuts. So same thing, she closes the door, gun comes out right in her face, and this time, though, she describes it, the first escort described it as very calm, very much, I've done this before, gun in the face. But this time, they describes it as he was shaking, visibly nervous, and the gun was shaking. So maybe he was just, the night before he had killed someone, so maybe it was just thrown off. But anyway, so the pimp husband, sitting in the lobby waiting for a text, being like, yo, everything's good. Text doesn't come, because right when she closes the door, the gun pops out in her face. And so the husband is sitting there, and same thing, his husband's sitting there calling over and over and over again. And by this time, Philip had tied her up in the same white zip ties as everybody else. And he's looking around the room, rummaging around, and her phone just is going off. And so this is making Phil really nervous. He's going, why is your phone going off? Who is calling you over and over and over again? She's just like, I don't know. And all of a sudden, the pimp husband, just like the movies, has a room key. The pimp husband comes in the room. Well, this isn't ideal for Phil, so he points the gun
anthems, just like those haunted
right at
hills.
the pimp husband's face, and there's kind of a moment of like, what is going on? And the pimp husband, which is funny because he just totally bails on his escort wife, the pimp husband turns around and runs down the hall. He's just out. He's like, you know what? I'm out. I'm leaving my wife to deal with this guy on her own. And so he takes off down the hall one way. Phil, he's done too, so he takes off the other way down the hall. And once again, once he's out of the hall, he's caught on security cameras walking around, same big old nose, same big old white boy looking dude, same coat, same shoes, same hat, same posture. So he's caught again leaving, and they don't catch him again. And again, they call the cops, they find the footage, they're like, all right, so here we go again. Well, now we're up to the day where poor Megan, been in Jersey, trying to get her back figured out, and now she is heading back to Boston
The immense darkness of the pyramid kept
to reunite with her boyfriend, Philip Markoff, in their apartment.
with the cryptoglyph
And her
in
mom,
hand,
like I
we
said,
stand
warns
a
her,
chance
hey,
against the pyramid.
hey, be careful.
Bring it here and
There's a
let us
guy
get
in
your
Boston.
sight.
And she's like, oh, Mom, I'll be careful, you know. And so she gets back to their apartment. I'm sure there's a baby, so good to see you. How's your back feeling? I missed you. It was great to see my parents, but it was rough living with them. I felt like I was 13 again, and I'm glad to be back. I love you, baby, you know? I'm sure there was something like that. And in the meantime, the cops are furiously trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And a huge break in the case is one of Joe Lissa, the poor girl that was killed, one of her friends goes through her emails and actually locates an email from that night, from her 10 o'clock appointment, and turns it over to the cops. So the cops now have their computer nerds do what they do, and the computer nerds track the IP address from where the emails came from, and they track it to a little apartment in Quincy, in Boston. And so they go and stake out Quincy, and the apartment that they track the IP address for is rented by a Philip Markoff, a big old preppy looking white boy. So they go and they stake out the apartment, and sure enough, you know, they got the pictures of the hotel of this guy walking around. And sure enough, the door opens after staking it out, and a big old tall looking white boy with a nose looking the same. And they're like, all right, so they start following him. They start following him everywhere he goes just to see what he's doing. But Megan's back in town at this point, and so they're following him around. And Megan and Phil, that one of their things that they do for fun is they drive from Boston, where they live, to Foxwoods in Connecticut, Foxwoods Casino, and Phil will sit there and gamble for a while. Megan doesn't gamble. She likes to watch, and then they'll gamble for a while, and then they go and eat dinner somewhere together, and then they get a cheap hotel at the casino because he gambles, and that's one of their fun couple things that they do together. Boston police are furiously trying to follow Phil, keep the investigation going smoothly, and just try to figure this out. And as they're following him around, they get a little nervous because they see him and Megan come out with suitcases, and they get in a car, and they get on the highway. And so now there's police following them on the highway being like, all right, should we pull him over? Should we let him go? It's kind of this frantic moment. It's like, shit, are they leaving? What's going on? And in the meantime, they were trying to get a picture. And now that they know it's possibly Phil, they get like his, I don't know, college picture. They get like a picture of him off the internet of his face. And they were in the process of getting a photo lineup, so a bunch of blonde-looking dudes in a row with Philip, one of them. They were trying to get that to the first escort to try to say, this is him. Because they think if she says, this is him, you know, they got the IP address. Hopefully they can get fingerprints off the tape and off her phone. They got all of the footage of him walking around in the lobbies after he does it. And so they're thinking, you know, if we can just get her to identify him in the photo lineup, that'll be enough to arrest him for murder. And so it's this frantic thing. He's driving. That first escort is in New York City now. She had moved on to New York. So they send this photo lineup. They email it to a detective in New York City. All the while, Philip and Megan are on the highway driving, you know, with suitcases, with cops secretly behind them, you know, hoping that they don't get to a border of another state. And the New York detective gets the photo lineup, rushes to the first escort's hotel room, shows it to her. Immediately she's looking through it and goes, boom, this is him. And she says, I'm 1,000,000% sure, even more than Dahlia Dippa didn't do anything's 5,000% sure. She's 1,000,000% sure, baby. So the New York detective picks up the phone and says she identified him. And it's just this hectic thing. He's almost about ready to cross into Connecticut, and they get the phone call. She identified him. Do it. Make the move. And so, boom. All these lights come on behind him. A bunch of police cars. And as you can imagine, Megan, she's back. She's hanging out with her boyfriend. You know, they're broke. We find out that they're totally broke. No money. That college kid brutal broke. They're totally living off of Philip's student loans. He's taking out student loans for med school, and they're paying all their bills, all their rent, everything they do is off of those loans. But when Megan describes it, it's like, we're broke, but we're going to be okay because Philip's going to be a doctor, and I'm going to be a doctor. He's 2 years in, so the way she talks about it is, we're broke college kids, but, you know, Phil's going to be a doctor, so we'll be all right. And so the lights come on, and so you can imagine the surprise that Megan, you know, she's looking in the rearview mirror, and there's all these cop cars with their lights on behind them. And you can probably think of the feeling that Philip is thinking, having the week that he just had prior to this. And so they kind of look at each other, and they're like, what is going on? And the cops, you know, approached the car and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you. There's been this ongoing investigation. And of course, Megan is like, what the hell is going on? And Phil's like, I don't know, what is going on? And they take Megan and Phil down to the police station, and they interrogate them at the same time in different rooms. It's very fascinating, and I'm gonna link the interrogations for both of them. Both Megan, the girlfriend, who has no idea that her boyfriend is this Craigslist killer that leads this completely double life where he's going out in the middle of the night killing hookers, and you know, she has no idea. So she sits down in the interrogation room thinking, you know, she's got nothing to hide. And she doesn't. And you can tell, you know, she tells the truth. We listen to a lot of interrogations where the person just lies their ass off the whole time. She sits down and tells the truth. Well, as you can guess, and it feels like the truth, you can feel it in your bones. It's like, this girl's telling the truth. Well, you can guess that in the other room down the hall, old Philly boy, not so much. He seems to have a harder time remembering what happened the week before than his girlfriend does. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to cut it off. We'll get into the interrogations tomorrow. This is a wild one. I don't think that this one. I think that I'll be able to do this one this week, because as most of you know, or as you'll find out, the court case doesn't really. Something comes up and it doesn't really. It ends quicker than you might think. But yeah, thank you to everybody that has liked and subscribed and commented and participated. It really does help me out. Check out Philip's interrogation tonight if you haven't. Check out his girlfriend. I think they're both really worth a watch. And I was gonna wait and do this at another video, but I'll just give you guys this. Look at that, though. Can you see it? Coffee mugs coming soon. Why, Steven, why? I just wanted to talk to her, like I just wanted to talk. I just wanted to talk to her. Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Loser. How are ya? Happy Monday. So today, we're diving in to George Hughley III. The third. And real quick, before we get into that story, this is a bit of a interesting week here on True Crime Loser, because Wednesday, my girlfriend and I are flying out of town to beautiful Mesa, Arizona. I think I got some people in Arizona, right? But we're going to Arizona because it's my grandma's 90th birthday on Sunday. Grandma Loser turns 90 on Sunday. And it's my dad's mom. And so the whole family, my dad has 3 brothers. There's 4 of them. So all the brothers and all the families and all the cousins and everything are going to Mesa, Arizona, throwing a big party for Grandma. We're going to eat crazy food. My Aunt Jane is an amazing cook. And it's going to be great. I'm excited. I really like my dad's side of the family, the brothers, they're all just hilarious. It's a good time. So, the plan, if everything goes right, is get through, do the background information for George Hughley III today. People that haven't watched the interrogation, which I will link in the description, people that haven't watched the interrogation can watch that tonight, and then tomorrow and Wednesday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll go over the interrogation, finish her up on Wednesday, hopefully, and then I'm out in Arizona Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We come back on Sunday, and then hopefully, if I'm not too tired, we'll hit the ground running again on Monday. So that's the plan. I picked Hughley, one, because I think it's a really interesting story and interrogation, but also I was trying to pick one that I thought would be a 3-day event. Like, I was looking at doing Michael Dunn next, but that one with he gets on the stand, and with all of those appearances in court and stuff, I think it's a huge one. So I went with Hughley. It can be a tough interrogation to watch for a lot of people because he says like even more than old Chrissy Poo did. He's like the Mozart of like, just like, I wanted to talk. He is one horrifying surfer bro. Just a spoiled, rotten kid. But yeah, we'll get into it. Then another thing pretty exciting is I was emailing last night with another true crime YouTuber that you guys might know. real good true crime YouTuber, but never learned how to swim. But we were emailing last night, and we, I think, have some pretty cool things planned for everybody. So, with that, let's get into this. Just wanted to talk. All right, so George Hughley. If you were to listen to George Hughley talk, the third, George Hughley the third. If you were to listen to him talk, you're like, what is this guy from the Valley in LA? Or like San Francisco? Like, dude, the pizza, bro. Tight. He talks like a Valley girl. And so I looked it up just 5 minutes ago. I'm thinking, like, is this guy from like San Francisco or LA, or where is this guy from? Well, he grew up in Washington, D.C. So to grow up, you know you got a trust fund if you grow up in the Washington, D.C. and you're just like, dude, like, I just wanted to talk. I really don't know how he ended up with the accent that he does, but he can use the word like really we've never seen before. And so he All right, good morning, Schmida, and welcome back to another episode of True Crime Loser. How you doing? That's good. If you would like to support this show, if you enjoy it, then think about it. There's a working Patreon link in the description. I would really appreciate it. All right, so today, Georgie Hughley the Fifth. Yesterday, I made a mistake and was calling him the Third. Actually, it's the Fifth. So there's 5 of them. Great. So George Hughley the Fifth is in the hot seat. And the first thing notable with this interrogation is the detectives don't tell him why he's there. All they say is, George, hey George, you're here because we're investigating a case. You are being detained, and you're not free today. That's all he knows. So the reason they do that is because you'll see them in a lot of interrogations. They don't give up any information that they don't need to, and it's exactly because of a situation like this. And in other interrogations, you'll hear someone be like, well, they'll ask the detectives a question. Well, you know, was her shirt still on when you found her? And they're like, we can't tell you that. And the reason is for this exact situation. So if they would have come out and just said, what did you do? Yardley's dead. What are you doing? Then they wouldn't have gotten the full. He just gives them the whole confession. He puts himself at the scene. He says they got into a fight. He says that he took her computer. And so, you couldn't argue that, I don't know, we just got in a fight and then I left and then her computer's gone. Was she robbed? Did someone come? He gives them everything. They get the whole computer, even before he knows she's dead. So good job to the detectives, because it's not easy. Like I always say, we always are pretty quick to criticize, like, what is that detective doing? Even though I'm about to criticize one of these detectives. But there's a lot of things that are thinking, okay, don't give all the information. Don't go too quick. Don't freak out so they quit talking. Don't get apply pressure, but don't apply too much pressure too early. Just a million things. So these two did really well of just, we're here for a case, Georgie. And then in George's mind, he's just like, why? I probably just got another fight. Like, I'm so good at throwing a little ball in a net, it's gonna figure itself out. It's all good. So they sit down. After listening to interrogation more last night. I don't know. I don't think he sounds like anywhere. Like I was saying, maybe he sounds. And someone got real mad at me that I said he sounds like people in San Francisco. I didn't mean to say that. The reason I said that is at one point in the interrogation, he says that he wants to move to San Francisco, and I think that was just in my head. But he doesn't really sound like, even in Colorado, where I grew up, there's a bunch of like snowboard bros, like, bro, like ski or die, bro. Like, whoa, did you hit the hill, bro? And he doesn't even really talk like them. So he just may talk like his own breed, just, and so, all right, so he's in the hot seat, and I think the female detective does really well. I think she's on it, and I think the other detective, who I found out his name is Ed, Detective Ed, I think he does horrible. I feel like Ed has lines that he practiced, like Detective Ed in his house before the interrogation, like, combing his hair, practicing his big lines like, "You're not here to dance with us." He has all these weird lines, but the problem is he kept screwing them up in this one. Like, I think his big line that he wanted to use throughout this interrogation was, "You're not here to dance with us, George. This is serious." So I picture Ed in his house looking in the mirror like, "You're not here to dance with us." Like maybe has some music going in the background, like, "You're not here to dance with us. I'm Ed. Detective Ed is in the house." But he blows it. His big moment in the interrogation, he tries to use his big line a few times, and they just flubs the line. So at one point, George is like, after he figures out that she's dead, saying, "There's no way she's dead. He's not dead." And Ed just goes, "You're not here for any reason, George." And everyone is kind of just like, even the female detective's like, "What?" And then like a little bit later, he tried it again, and finally he gets it. It's like, "You're not here to dance with us, George." But like 4 times, he just tried his big line, like his big Quentin Tarantino, like, "You're not here to dance, buddy." But it just came out like, "You're not here to dance with us." And it's like when you're doing stand-up and just you try something and it's just not funny at all. "You're not here with us, George." And even George, Ed was making George look pretty smart. Like at one point, Detective Ed was like, "I think I know why you took the computer, George." And George's like, "Why did I take the computer?" And Ed's like, "Because there was an email on the computer, George, and you wanted that email to disappear, right, George? You're not here to be with us, George." And even George was like, "You don't delete emails by taking one computer. They're just on the internet, and so you could look at them from any computer." It's like, that's the only time George looked smart in this interrogation, when Ed was like, Detective Ed was like, "Is that why you took the computer, George?" And George's like, "No." And Ed is just like, "All right." So Ed was comically bad, in my opinion. Almost to the point it seemed like a comedy detective movie where they wrote one of the detectives like comically stupid, but it's not realistic. But Ed was having an off day, in my opinion. "You're not here, George, because of the reason." Ed, that was incoherent. Okay, so let's get into this. So they sit him down, and they do a really good job of just acting like no one's dead. So they're she's a female detective that does really well. She's reading him his rights, and they're acting. You gotta be kind of a good actor to be an interrogator, because she's, chuckling and laughing, because they're acting like, it's all good. Let's just, you're here for a case. We're just investigating a case, so let's just talk. Let's just talk. And Ed's in the corner like, you're not here because we asked you to be here. And it's like, yeah, he is, George, or Ed. Ed's like, okay. So Georgie's in the hot seat. We're here investigating a case. They're downplaying it, you know, it's laughing. Ha ha, no one's dead. All right, they start with, describe me your day tomorrow. I talked about it yesterday, but George is like, so I would like play golf. I did like a father-son tournament with dad. And like I had like drank all day, then went to dinner, had like 2 wines at dinner, and then I went home, had beers. And so he describes it, and he goes to the bar, and then he's like, I had 5 more beers or something. He talks about drinking all day, and then he goes, and then I went and talked to Yardley. And as an interrogator, they didn't know if he was going to deny this. They didn't know what he was going to say when they said, what was your day tomorrow? All they were saying is, we're not going to deliver any information, and let's see what he says. So you gotta think that at that moment where he's talking about, I just got hammered drunk and then went inside Yardley, it had to be like, okay. Alright, don't freak out. Ed, don't use one of your lines right now, Ed. Just let him keep going. So he puts himself at the scene. That had to have been a little bit of a... He just put himself. It's one of the hardest things to do. So... God, his story about getting to Yardley is just one for the books. So that they're like, the detective's like, so who's Yardley? And he's like, my former girlfriend. A female detective. Like, okay, keep going. And then so he's like, so like I get there, and I'm like, Yardley, let's just talk. I just like wanted to talk, but like Yardley was just like she's like didn't want to talk. But she was already like freaking out about that. She was like freaking out already, just like I don't want to talk, just freaking out. And I was like, Yardley, let's talk. We gotta talk about this. Excuse me. And this is where he he really brings in what's his face? Georgie the Fifth. Georgie the Fifth, his strategy is he just keeps referencing the week before when Yardley came in drunk and was like hitting him. You fucking and so he's like, yeah, like I just wanted to talk, but she was already freaking out about what happened last week, and like I was just like, let's talk, but she was like, so the real story, if you didn't catch the episode yesterday, so he describes that he got there and like knocked on the door and was like, let's just talk, and she was like, I don't want to talk. So like that's the story. The real story is he got there, knocked on the door, she was like, go away, George, and he kicks the door down, Shining style, just and one thing that I didn't talk about yesterday that I meant to is when everyone was describing like how good of a guy he was after he killed Yardley, you know, just like we didn't see it coming, he's always been a good guy. They were like, he was even the vice president of Operation Smile. And I have no idea what Operation Smile is, but I just picture
Fate lies ahead of us.
George
Pyramid destroyed so many lives.
just being like, hi, I'm George,
Getting inside is
and
paramount.
this is Operation
We must
Smile.
find something,
And
anything to help us prepare
I think
for
I
their
said that at the
savage
beginning.
return.
I don't know. Either way, but
Remember
so
to
he's
keep your
just
wits about you.
with Operation Smile, and he
We do
kicks
not
this
know
door
what
down.
tricks they may
But
play
in his
within.
story, he's just like she was just like, freaking out, right? And you know, they don't. they don't press. They're just like, at this point, the whole strategy is just like, keep him talking.
It's happening again.
Just keep him
Like
talking.
it's reaching inside me.
And so he's like, yeah, like, I got over there, and it's just like, I was like, Yardley, let's just talk.
Pyramid is
I just wanted to talk to her, but she was like, oh, like already freaking out about what happened last week. So he's really trying to push the, like, she came over last week and was like punching me, and I was like, go away, like, you can't punch me. And so I just wanted to talk about what happened last week. It's just outrageous to talk about it. And it's just wild to hear his
It beckons us to come closer.
his story, but the reason is he's just so open about it, because in his head, this isn't gonna, he thinks that it's just gonna be another, like, yeah, like, I'm the athlete, you know, I got in a fight, I'm a lacrosse player.
These things await
That's what happens.
inside.
I got into a fight.
There's
And,
no turning back now.
And the whole time he's just sitting there, and he's not nervous. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, the one and only Little T.
Welcome. We've been waiting.
T. Hey, Little T.
You are so
Anyway.
close now.
And
Just a
so
little further.
they're just letting him talk through the story. And, you know, he's just, his main goal, like I said, is just, last week she came in hitting me. Look, I'm not the only one that hits. And all I wanted to do was talk. Okay? I just wanted to talk about it. At one point he even says, I was there just trying to make things better. And she was like, oh, like, I don't want to talk. And I just wanted to talk. Alright, you guys get it. Yeah. So his story about the whole, like, she was just like, and I wanted to talk, is the most insane story of all time. And she also was like, she's like, once I got in, she was like, no, George, go away. And she started, like, hitting her head on the wall, and I was like, stop it, Yardley. And I grabbed her, shook her, and I was like, stop hitting your head against the wall. And she was like just hitting her like head, and it was just like, Yardley, stop. And then he's like, and then at one point,
There's only weakness.
we were on the floor, and we were talking, and I was like, Yardley, and then she, like, her nose started bleeding, and I was like, let's just talk. And then the conversation was like going nowhere, and so, like, I just, like, threw her on the bed, and I was like, go to bed, like. And then I just left because I was like, I wanted to talk, and she didn't. And so that's his. And they just are like, okay. They don't challenge that insane tale. They don't do anything. They switch gears. So he's just been referencing last week. So, like, because of last week, I was like, let's talk. And so then they were like, all right, what happened last week? They let his story hang. And so again, that's good, because if they were like, dude, none of that happened. You kicked the door down, like, drunk, blacked out, psycho. How scary would it be to have somebody
Light abandoned
kicking a door down slowly
left him for dead.
and steadily, and you're just in the room?
There is only failure.
Like, we go out on the, like, little comedy tours. We drive all over the place, and we stay at these motels in the middle of nowhere. And I always think the scariest thing is to be at a motel in the middle of nowhere and to have somebody start slowly kicking down the door. And poor Yardley, that must have been just this drunk, blacked out, sweaty, giant man just kicking the door down. But they're like, all right, what happened last week? And he tells the whole story. I don't need to go into it too much, but it's like they had normal college stuff where they're coming to the end of the relationship. They're starting to bang other people. she banged some guy from another college. Texted him like I'm so, which is messed up.
One by one,
She texted him like I'm so glad I banged that other guy.
the light divine.
And then she came back into town. They saw each other at the bar. He ignored her. And then she came over to his place, and they got into a fight, and like her friends had to pull her off. And
There is only
it really does sound like there was some physical abuse from both of them. They just had one of those relationships. Still, still George, he weighs like 100 pounds more than her, so no excuse, George. But that's his whole thing, is like, look, like we have this like abusive, what happened last week is why like this happened. He's going off of that. And okay, and then they let him ramble on about what happened last week, and that is, in his eyes, is explaining his actions, because he just needed to talk, right? After last week, who wouldn't want to talk? He has to talk. And then they were like, how did you get into her room? And he was like, I knocked. And I was like, Yardley.
Don't you recognize
And
us?
she heard me and let me in.
We are not your friend.
And
We are not your enemy.
they were like,
We
are you
are
sure?
your
And he sits there
salvation.
and he's like, actually,